Welcome to our deep dive. This week, we're going to be taking a look at The Economist and all the fascinating trends and things that are shaping the world.
Yeah, this one is a really interesting addition.
I thought so, too. One of the first things that caught my eye, actually, was this whole thing about Chinese car makers taking over.
Yeah.
Did you know that they actually overtook both Germany and Japan in exports already?
It's a big change, and it's not a one-off thing either.
Right.
Predictions are saying that by the end of the decade, 1 in 3 cars sold globally could be Chinese.
1 in 3? That's wild. So what is fueling this surge? Is it just a matter of lower costs?
I mean, lower cost is definitely a part of it, but it's not the whole story.
Right.
The Chinese government has really been putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
They're investing in the industry, providing all these subsidies and incentives to really push growth and innovation.
So it's that combination of government backing and
Yeah.
then the technological progress.
Yeah.
But are they just making cars for themselves, or are they really setting their sights on the global market?
Oh, they're definitely looking at global domination.
Okay.
They're targeting markets in Southeast Asia, Europe, even parts of Africa.
Wow.
And they're also investing heavily in research and development, particularly in electric vehicles and self-driving technologies.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. As the domestic market matures, they need new avenues for growth.
Right.
But breaking into established markets with strong, legacy brands like Toyota and Volkswagen,
Yeah.
that's a tough challenge,
Huge, yeah.
isn't it?
I mean, you think about those brands, they have that reputation, they have that brand recognition.
Right. It's like when you see a Toyota or you see a Volkswagen, you have this expectation of a certain level of quality.
Exactly.
But with a Chinese brand, it's still, for now, it's kind of like an unknown.
Yeah.
Do you think they can overcome that hurdle?
I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Okay.
They've already made some pretty big inroads, especially in markets where they're looking for more affordable options,
Right.
vehicles that are feature-packed, and, you know, as they continue to innovate and improve their quality, I mean, they could really become a major player on the global stage.
It really makes you wonder, will we all be driving Chinese cars in the future?
It's a possibility.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit
Sure.
and talk about this whole food security thing,
Yeah.
which kind of surprised me with China.
Yeah, this was a big one for
You
me.
think of Xi Jinping, you think of,
Yeah.
global power plays. You don't necessarily think of, making sure that everybody's fed.
Yeah, and so at first glance, it might seem a little out of character, but
Right.
when you dig deeper, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
China faces some serious challenges.
Right.
They've got limited arable land, a huge population that keeps growing, and a dependence on those imports
Right.
for key food items.
So it's not just about feeding people, it's about national security.
It really is.
And kind of asserting independence on the world stage.
By boosting domestic food production, Xi Jinping's really trying to reduce that reliance on imports
Right.
and strengthen China's ability to, feed itself no matter what's happening globally.
Yeah.
And he's even considering using previously resisted methods like genetically modified crops
Right.
to achieve that goal.
So it's not just about increasing production, it's about controlling their own food destiny.
It is.
Okay.
Now, while China's focused on food security, the EU is actually facing a different kind of challenge, falling behind in the global AI race.
Mhm.
They're struggling to keep up with America and China when it comes to developing these advanced AI technologies.
So why is that? Is it just funding, or are there other factors in play?
Well, funding is definitely part of the problem.
Okay.
I mean, training these powerful AI models, it costs a lot more in the EU compared to the US and China.
Okay.
But it's not just money.
Right.
There's also policy differences that are holding them back.
Like what?
We'll take data privacy, for example. The EU has much stricter regulations,
Okay.
and that can limit the amount of data that's available for training these AI models.
So it's this combination of financial hurdles and regulatory hurdles.
Right.
What are the implications for the EU?
Right.
Will they be able to catch up, or are they going to fall further behind?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
If they don't address these issues, they risk missing out on all the economic and strategic benefits of AI.
Right.
It's kind of like,
Yeah.
being left out of the cool kids club, but for cutting-edge technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
This could impact their global competitiveness, their innovation
Right.
in the long run.
Okay. So it's a critical challenge for them to address.
Absolutely.
Speaking of challenges, let's talk about electric vehicles for a second.
Okay.
American EV makers seem to be facing an uphill battle in keeping up with the global electric revolution,
It's a tough market,
isn't it?
especially with competition heating up,
Right.
particularly from Chinese companies who are just grabbing more and more market share.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
You got Foxconn, the Taiwanese tech giant.
Yeah, the guys who make iPhones.
Exactly.
Right.
They're actually considering investing in Lordstown Motors, which is this struggling American EV startup.
Interesting.
But there's a catch.
Oh, there's always a catch.
There is. They're only interested if Lordstown can prove that they can actually develop viable electric vehicles.
So it's like a prove yourself moment.
It is.
Yeah.
And this is a different approach than what they're doing with Fisker, another American EV company.
Right.
Where they're only manufacturing the cars.
Okay.
So what does this tell us about the state of the American EV industry?
Well, it's definitely a make or break moment for them.
Right.
The challenges they face are huge. I mean, Chinese companies, they have a head start when it comes to things like production capacity,
right,
supply chains,
right,
and government support.
So these American companies, they really need to innovate and adapt quickly.
Yeah, if they want to stay in the game.
It's a high-stakes race, for sure, with implications for the economy and the environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, on that note, let's shift our focus to the Pentagon for a moment.
Okay.
It seems America's defense spending is at a bit of a crossroads.
It is. There's a lot of debate about how to allocate those resources in this rapidly changing world.
On one hand, you have the argument that increased spending is needed,
right,
to counter China's growing military power.
Right.
And on the other, you have this view that smarter spending and prioritizing technological innovation is the way to go.
It's a tough call, isn't it?
It is. It's a real budget tug of war.
Yeah, and both sides make valid points.
Right.
I mean, if we don't keep up with China's advancements,
right,
that could have some pretty serious implications for global security.
Right.
But just throwing money at the problem,
yeah,
that's not always the best solution either.
And a perfect example of this is the F-35 fighter jet program.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been plagued by these cost overruns and technical issues.
Mm-hmm. So many people are asking, is it really worth it to maintain such a large fleet of these expensive aircraft?
Right.
I mean, maybe those funds could be better used elsewhere.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's a complex issue.
It is?
There are no easy answers.
Right.
The F-35, it's definitely technologically advanced.
Right.
But is it cost effective? That's the question.
Right.
And there's definitely a growing number of people who are saying maybe a more balanced approach is what we need.
Right.
You know, something that prioritizes both technological innovation and cost efficiency.
So maybe investing in a more diverse range of military capabilities.
Yeah.
You know, things like drones, cyber warfare, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Maybe that would prove more effective and sustainable in the long run.
It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
It is, and it has potentially huge consequences for global power dynamics.
Absolutely.
Speaking of familiar faces on the world stage, it seems Donald Trump is thinking about making a comeback.
Oh, yeah, he's back.
He is back.
And he's not wasting any time making headlines. He's already talking about reimposing those tariffs on Chinese and Mexican goods.
Here we go again.
Remember those from his first term?
Right.
The ones that sparked all that trade tension and led to higher prices for us.
Didn't those tariffs hurt American businesses and consumers?
Well, he argues that they're necessary to protect American jobs and industries from what he calls unfair competition.
So that America First agenda is back.
It's back.
With a vengeance.
But the question is, will it actually work, or will it just lead to more problems?
Well, didn't those policies also lead to retaliatory tariffs from other countries?
Yeah.
And ultimately escalate into a trade war that hurt everyone?
It did.
Could a return to those policies destabilize the global economy?
It's definitely a risk.
Isn't it?
These protectionist policies, like tariffs, they can have ripple effects throughout the whole global economy.
Right.
Disrupting supply chains, increasing costs for businesses and consumers, and potentially triggering this whole tit-for-tat escalation of trade barriers.
So it's a dangerous game to play.
Yeah.
With the global economy hanging in the balance.
It is.
Okay, speaking of potentially strained relations, it looks like South Africa is finding itself at a crossroads with the U.S.
Their differing views on things like the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict are causing friction.
What are the potential consequences of this? I mean, could it have real economic repercussions for South Africa?
There's definitely concern about that.
Right.
The U.S. is a major trading partner for South Africa.
Right.
Any kind of deterioration in the relationship could impact trade and investment.
Yeah.
And there's also that risk that this tension could just exacerbate those existing challenges in South Africa. You know, poverty, inequality, unemployment.
And to make matters even more complicated, you have Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Tesla himself.
A South African-born entrepreneur.
Right.
Publicly criticizing the South African government's policies.
He hasn't been shy about expressing his concerns
He hasn't.
about their stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and what it means for their relationship with the West.
It's a complex situation
It is.
with all these different layers of geopolitical and economic entanglement.
Yeah, it really highlights those challenges
Right.
that countries face in trying to navigate
Right.
these turbulent waters.
Okay, so it seems like every corner of the world is facing some sort of upheaval or uncertainty.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
But before we get too overwhelmed, let's shift our attention
Okay.
to a case that's shaking the very foundations of the British justice system.
Oh, wow.
You probably remember the story of Lucy Letby.
The British nurse who was convicted of killing babies in her care?
That's the one.
Yeah, that was a horrifying case.
It was.
And now there are these doubts being raised about the validity of the conviction,
Right.
which is unsettling, to say the least.
It is what's causing this reassessment of the verdict.
Well, there's some new statistical analysis
Ugh.
that suggests that those deaths could have been natural.
Oh, wow.
And there were also some procedural flaws during the investigation and trial that have raised concerns about the fairness of the verdict.
So there's a possibility that an innocent person has been wrongfully convicted.
Scary thought,
It is.
but it's a possibility.
It's a reminder that even in well-established legal systems,
Yeah,
mistakes can be made,
right.
and that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
It raises these really profound questions about accountability,
Yeah,
due process, and the foundations of our legal systems.
for sure.
Well, that's a lot to absorb.
It is.
From the rise of Chinese car makers to food security in China,
Right.
the EU's AI challenges the Pentagon spending dilemma, Trump's potential comeback, South Africa's geopolitical tightrope walk,
It's a lot.
and a British justice system under scrutiny.
Right.
We've covered a lot of ground
We have.
in this first part of our deep dive.
It's amazing how all these seemingly disparate events are actually interconnected
It is.
in our increasingly complex world.
Well said.
Yeah.
And we're not done yet. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into these global trends.
Can't wait. Welcome back.
All right, so let's pick up where we left off and talk a little bit more about that potential Trump comeback.
Okay.
We touched on his controversial tariff plans, but could a return to those policies actually spark a global trade war?
You know, it's a valid concern.
Yeah.
Trump's America First agenda really caused a lot of friction during his presidency.
Right.
Especially those tariffs on goods from China and Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, they led to higher prices for us.
Right.
And retaliatory measures from other countries.
So it really seems like a recipe for economic instability,
It does.
both domestically and internationally.
What could happen? Well, we could see disruptions to global supply chains,
Okay.
shortages, delays.
Yeah.
We could also see inflation as those imported goods become more expensive. And then there's the impact on international relations.
Right.
It could really erode trust between nations.
So it's not just about economic consequences, it's about geopolitical stability as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so moving on from potentially explosive trade wars.
Okay.
We talked about China's push for food security, but they're also making some strategic moves in the tech world
Yeah, they are.
that are worth exploring.
For sure.
Their diplomatic strategy seems to be evolving with a focus on isolating Taiwan.
Yeah, they've managed to persuade several countries
Really?
to switch their diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to China.
And how are they doing that?
Well, they're offering economic incentives
Right.
and leveraging their growing global influence.
That's a significant development,
It is.
considering that Taiwan sees itself as an independent nation.
Right.
So how is China using language and diplomacy to kind of advance this agenda?
It's a really interesting example of the power of words
Okay.
to shape perceptions and influence outcomes. China's been very deliberate in its use of language in diplomatic documents.
Okay.
Gradually shifting from urging countries to respect their one China policy,
Right.
which asserts Taiwan as part of China,
Okay.
to actually demanding that countries endorse it.
Wow.
It's subtle, but it's a really meaningful change in tone
Right.
that reflects their increasingly assertive approach.
Yeah, it's amazing how a few carefully chosen words
Right.
can have such a profound impact on geopolitics.
It's true.
It shows how language itself can be a tool of power.
For sure.
Okay, and speaking of powerful tools, let's talk about these advancements in artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Specifically, the development of these large language models like the one Google is working on.
Those are incredible.
These models are truly remarkable.
They are.
I mean, Google's model, for example.
Right.
It's designed to answer any question you can imagine.
It's been trained on this massive data set of text and code.
Right.
So it can generate human quality responses.
It sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It kind of is.
It's credible.
It can even write different creative text formats.
Like what?
Like poems, code scripts,
Wow.
musical pieces, emails, letters.
But with great power comes great responsibility, right?
That is the question.
What are some of the potential downsides of these systems?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is bias.
Okay.
Because they're trained on this vast amount of data, they can reflect and amplify those existing societal biases,
Right.
which can lead to some pretty unfair or discriminatory outcomes.
It's like that old saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly.
Or you are what you eat.
Right.
If you feed a system biased data, it's going to produce biased output.
That's the problem.
There's also that whole concern about job displacement as well.
Yeah, I mean, as these tools get more sophisticated,
Right.
they could start automating tasks that humans currently do.
Leading to job losses in certain sectors.
That's a bit unsettling to think about.
It is.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're creating something that could potentially make us obsolete.
That's the fear, isn't it?
It is.
All right, well, let's step back from the edge for a minute.
Okay.
Let's talk about Elon Musk.
Okay.
He's apparently expressed interest in acquiring OpenAI.
Which is the company behind ChatGPT.
That's right, the chatbot sensation.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an interesting development,
It is.
considering OpenAI's mission and Musk's sometimes controversial business practices.
Yeah, OpenAI was founded on this whole AI for good philosophy.
Right.
So how does that align with Musk's ambitions and his own personal views on AI?
OpenAI was initially established as a nonprofit, wasn't it?
It was.
With the goal of making sure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity.
That was the idea.
But there have been some shifts in their structure and funding.
There have.
So some people argue that that original mission has become a bit diluted.
It's true.
So is Musk's interest a positive or negative development for OpenAI?
That's a tough one.
Could his involvement shift their focus or their priorities?
Well, Musk has expressed concerns about OpenAI's safety practices in the past, and he's worried about the potential for their technology to be misused.
Right.
But on the other hand, he could bring a lot of resources and expertise to the table,
Right.
which could accelerate their research and development,
Right.
but it could also push them in a completely different direction.
So it's almost like this suspenseful drama unfolding.
Yeah, with Elon Musk as the unpredictable protagonist.
Okay, well, while the future of AI remains uncertain, one thing is for sure.
What's that?
The global economy is undergoing some pretty big changes.
Yeah, things are definitely shifting.
Remember those rock-bottom interest rates we had during the pandemic?
Well, yeah, those were the days.
Those days are over.
It seems like we're all scrambling to adjust
We are?
to this new reality of higher interest rates.
Those low rates really fueled a borrowing frenzy.
They did.
People were taking advantage of low-cost mortgages. Businesses were taking on cheap debt.
It was easy money.
It was.
But then inflation started to rear its ugly head.
It did.
And central banks around the world, they had to step in.
Right.
Raise those rates to cool things down.
And this shift is having a ripple effect across the globe.
Higher interest rates mean higher borrowing costs.
Right.
For individuals and businesses.
Which means reduced spending.
Yeah.
Reduced investment.
And that can slow economic growth.
Right.
Make it harder for businesses to expand or hire new people.
So it's a tough adjustment for everybody.
It is.
Especially those who got used to those historically low rates.
It's a reminder that things can change really quickly.
They can.
And we need to be prepared to adapt.
Speaking of adapting to changing conditions, let's talk about Germany for a second.
Okay.
Once considered this economic powerhouse of Europe,
Right.
they're now facing a perfect storm of challenges.
They're dealing with soaring energy prices stemming from that war in Ukraine.
Right.
Supply chain disruptions, labor shortages.
Those high energy costs are hitting their manufacturing sector particularly hard.
Yeah, they are.
And the lack of reliable supply chains is making it really difficult for businesses to get the materials and components they need.
It's a mess.
And on top of all that, their government is implementing policies that some business leaders say aren't exactly helping.
Yeah, proposed tax hikes and increased regulations.
A lot of people in the business community are arguing that these measures will discourage investment and stifle innovation.
It's that classic clash between government intervention and free market principles.
It is.
Yeah.
Will these policies actually stabilize the economy, or will they make things worse?
It's a question that has economists and policymakers debating fiercely.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It is.
The outcome will really depend on a lot of different factors,
It will.
including the effectiveness of the policies, how businesses respond, and the overall global economic climate.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
It's a situation that warrants close attention
Absolutely.
because Germany's economic health really has ripple effects throughout Europe and beyond.
It does.
It's a reminder that even the most robust economies
Right.
are vulnerable to external shocks
Yeah.
and internal pressures.
Absolutely.
Okay, so from the complexities of the German economy to something a bit more, well, unexpected.
Okay, what's that?
Let's talk about fish farming.
Fish farming. Okay, that's an interesting shift in focus.
It might seem like a niche topic, but it's actually a rapidly growing industry,
It is.
particularly in Africa.
Okay.
And it has the potential to address some critical issues, like food security and economic development.
So it's not just about putting fish on people's plates.
It's not.
It's about creating sustainable livelihoods
Exactly.
and boosting local economies.
Well, fish farming offers a controlled environment to produce protein-rich food,
Right.
so it reduces the pressure on wild fish stocks.
Which are often overfished.
They are.
Yeah.
It also has the potential to create jobs and generate income
Yeah.
for local communities.
Especially in rural areas where other opportunities might be limited.
Right.
It sounds like a really promising solution.
It does.
But like any industry, there must be challenges.
There are.
What are some of the hurdles?
Well, access to financing is a major obstacle.
Okay.
Setting up a fish farm requires significant capital investment,
Right.
which can be tough to secure.
Especially in developing countries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there are the technical challenges as well.
Like what?
Things like ensuring water quality, managing disease outbreaks, and developing sustainable farming practices.
So it's not just throwing some fish in a pond.
No, it's not.
It's more complicated than that.
It is.
It requires expertise, resources, careful planning.
To create a successful and sustainable operation.
But if they can overcome those challenges,
Yeah.
the potential benefits are huge.
Both in terms of food security and economic empowerment.
For sure.
Okay, so from frozen landscapes to soaring ambitions, let's talk about Indonesia for a second.
Okay.
It seems they have their sights set on becoming a major military power,
Really?
with plans to acquire an aircraft carrier.
An aircraft carrier. Wow, that's a big move.
Their defense minister has actually publicly expressed his desire to get one,
Interesting.
arguing that it's necessary to protect their vast maritime territory and enhance their regional influence.
That's quite a statement.
It is.
An aircraft carrier is a major investment,
It is.
both financially and in terms of expertise.
Right.
Is Indonesia really ready for that?
Well, that's a question a lot of analysts are debating.
Okay.
Operating an aircraft carrier, effectively, it requires a highly skilled Navy
For sure.
and a robust support infrastructure.
It's not easy.
It's not.
Some people are questioning whether Indonesia has the resources and capabilities right now to manage such a large-scale military asset.
It's a bold move, for sure.
It is.
It signals their growing assertiveness
Right.
in the region and their desire to project power on a much larger scale.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Okay, so from frozen landscapes to soaring ambitions,
Okay.
let's wrap things up with a topic that touches on a fundamental aspect of any society:
What's that?
law enforcement. There's a book generating a lot of buzz right now called Few Rules, Better People, written by a former police officer turned academic.
Okay, the title itself is intriguing.
It is.
What's the main argument?
Well, he argues that excessive bureaucracy and regulations actually stifle common sense
Okay.
and hinder effective policing.
Interesting.
He thinks officers should have more discretion and flexibility.
So he's saying that would lead to better outcomes. Is improved community relations.
Yeah, it's a controversial viewpoint, for sure.
It is?
It raises those questions about accountability
Right.
and the potential for abuse if officers are given too much leeway.
It's a tough balance.
It is.
Too many rules can lead to inflexibility and inefficiency.
Right.
But too much discretion could lead to bias and misconduct. The
Right.
key is finding that sweet spot.
It's a debate that will likely continue
Yeah.
as societies figure out the evolving role of law enforcement.
This book has definitely sparked a conversation about how to improve policing, build trust between communities and law enforcement, and ensure that justice is served fairly and effectively.
Well said. All right, welcome back for the final stretch of our global deep dive.
Ready for some more surprises?
Always ready for surprises.
Oh, good.
So in this last part, we're going to be exploring some of the more unusual and perhaps even quirky trends that are shaping the world.
The ones that don't always make the headlines.
Exactly.
But tell us a lot about what's going on beneath the surface.
Exactly.
Okay, let's do it.
So first up, South Korea is investing heavily in what they're calling a military metaverse.
Yeah, this is a pretty wild one.
It is.
They're setting up this whole research center dedicated to developing these cutting-edge technologies for national security.
So we're talking about virtual reality for military training and simulations.
Exactly.
So soldiers are prepping for real-world scenarios, but in a virtual world.
Right. It's like a high-tech boot camp, but without the physical risks.
So what's the strategy behind this?
Well, VR training offers a lot of advantages. Well, for one, it's safe and cost-effective.
Okay.
You can simulate all these realistic combat situations without the danger of live-fire exercises.
Right.
It can also help improve collaboration and communication skills.
Okay.
Because soldiers can train together in this virtual environment.
So they don't even have to be in the same physical location.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
And it's especially useful given how complex modern warfare is becoming.
So this technology, it allows for the creation of these highly immersive and customizable training scenarios.
It does.
So soldiers are being prepared for a much wider range of potential threats.
That's the goal.
Okay, so from virtual battles to a real-world battle brewing in a rather unexpected arena.
Oh, where's that?
The world of refrigerators.
Refrigerators? What?
Yeah, it seems those escalating tensions between America and China are spilling over into even the most mundane aspects of our lives.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So the U.S. government is increasingly concerned about Chinese-made refrigerators, specifically those equipped with smart technology.
Right, those internet-connected ones.
They worry that these seemingly innocent appliances could be used for espionage.
Espionage from a refrigerator.
I know it sounds a little far-fetched,
It does.
but in this age of interconnected devices and data breaches, those concerns aren't entirely unfounded.
No, they're not.
I mean, there's this growing awareness of the potential for smart devices to be compromised
Right.
and used for malicious purposes.
Data theft, surveillance, all sorts of things.
It's like a reminder that the geopolitical landscape is shifting,
It is.
and even everyday objects are getting caught in the crossfire.
Who knew refrigerators could be pawns in a global chess match?
Okay, so from the chilling world of refrigerator espionage
Okay.
to something a bit more whimsical.
Okay, I like whimsical.
There's this burgeoning trend in China, ice and snow tourism.
Ice and snow tourism. Interesting.
So instead of sunny beaches, people are flocking to the frozen north.
What's driving this trend?
Well, China's northeastern provinces are known for their long, frigid winters, right?
Yeah, they are.
But they're actually experiencing this surge in popularity as tourist destinations.
So people are embracing the cold instead of escaping it.
They are, and it's partly thanks to the growing appeal of winter sports and activities.
So skiing, snowboarding, ice skating, all that fun stuff.
Exactly.
And I guess there's also just the simple beauty of a snow-covered landscape.
It has a magical allure for sure.
It does.
Is the Chinese government supporting this trend?
They are.
Okay.
They're investing a lot in infrastructure to support the industry.
Building new resorts, expanding transportation networks.
Exactly.
They're promoting this whole ice and snow tourism thing.
Right.
As a way to boost economic development.
In these colder regions.
Okay, so from frozen landscapes to soaring ambitions.
All right, what have we got now?
Let's talk about Indonesia.
Okay.
It seems they have their sights set on becoming a major military power,
Really?
with plans to acquire an aircraft carrier.
An aircraft carrier?
An aircraft carrier.
That's ambitious.
Well, their defense minister has publicly said that they want one,
Wow.
arguing that it's necessary to protect their massive maritime territory
Okay.
and enhance their regional influence.
That's a big step.
It is.
I mean, an aircraft carrier is a huge investment.
It is.
Financially and in terms of the expertise you need to run one.
Right.
Is Indonesia really ready for that?
Well, that's a question a lot of analysts are asking.
Yeah.
I mean, to operate an aircraft carrier effectively, you need a highly skilled Navy
You do.
and a really strong support infrastructure.
It's complicated.
It's a bold move for sure.
It definitely signals their growing assertiveness in the region
Right.
and their desire to project power on a larger scale.
Okay, so let's wrap up our deep dive
Okay, sounds good.
with a topic that touches on a fundamental aspect of any society,
What's that?
law enforcement.
Right.
There's a book that's generating a lot of buzz right now called Few Rules, Better People,
Few rules, better people.
written by a former police officer turned academic.
Okay, I'm listening.
So the author argues that all that excessive bureaucracy and regulations,
Yeah.
it actually stifles common sense and hinders effective policing.
So less is more in his view.
He thinks so.
Interesting.
He advocates for giving officers more discretion and flexibility.
Believing that that would actually lead to better outcomes and improved community relations.
It's a controversial viewpoint, for sure,
It is.
because it raises those questions about accountability and the potential for abuse of power.
If officers are given too much leeway,
Exactly.
it's finding that balance, isn't it?
Too many rules can lead to inflexibility and inefficiency. But too much discretion can open the door to bias and misconduct.
Right.
It's about finding that right balance.
It's a debate that will likely continue as societies grapple with the role of law enforcement in a rapidly changing world.
Well, there you have it. A whirlwind tour of global trends, from the rise of Chinese car makers and the potential for AI-powered espionage to the allure of ice and snow tourism and the complexities of law enforcement.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did, and I hope you found it as insightful and thought-provoking as I have.
It's been a pleasure exploring all these different topics with you.
Likewise.
It's clear that the world is constantly changing,
It is.
and we're facing both challenges and opportunities.
The key is to stay informed, engaged, and adaptable.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining us on this global deep dive.
It's been fun.
We encourage you to continue exploring these topics, delving deeper into the nuances, and forming your own opinions.
Stay curious out there.
Until next time, keep those minds sharp.